Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us with the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. My name is Tracey McIntire. I'm the lead educator here, and I am happy to present a sort of a rebroadcast of our Women Soldiers talk. We were trying to broadcast it the last time we had it live here, and we had some technical difficulties. So we don't want to ignore you guys out there in the virtual world. So we're back here to give the talk again. And at the end, we will be taking questions. So please feel free to leave your questions in the comment section. First of all, as I said, I'm the lead educator here. My name is Tracey McIntire. I am also a volunteer at Antietam National Battlefield. Our talk today is going to focus on women soldiers at Antietam because our museum is in Frederick, Maryland, and Antietam, we had thousands of wounded soldiers coming into Frederick after the battle there. So we figured we'd concentrate a little bit on women soldiers at Antietam. So enough of me. I'm going to introduce my partner here.
And also Antietam, because yesterday was the anniversary, the 163rd anniversary of the Battle of Antietam, fought on September 17th, 1862. So that's a double reason. Not only are we in Frederick, Maryland, but the Battle of Antietam just happened, yesterday, 163 years ago. My name is Audrey Scanlan-Teller. I am a PhD. My PhD was at the University of Delaware. And it's actually in art history, which kind of has stumbled my way to a history of America. I specialized in medieval art history. I happen to live not too far from Frederick, Maryland, and got involved with the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. Found some of my relatives here, thanks to the work of Terry Reimer, who documented two of my ancestors who were in hospital here in Frederick City in the Civil War. Unfortunately, both of them passed away and would be buried at Antietam National Cemetery, where I am also a volunteer. So we are on the Battery B, 4th U.S. Battery D artillery detachment that does demonstrations, usually one Saturday a month during kind of the tourist season. So anyway, that's me. We can start our presentation. We're just going to be discussing women soldiers today who disguised themselves as men and fought in the Civil War. We're going to include an overview of how and why these women enlisted, and just go over some of the best documented women soldiers who, throughout the war, not only Antietam, but kind of war-wide, if that's a phrase we can use, the war-wide women soldiers, and then specifically address the women who were at Antietam itself. While it was illegal for women to dress as men and enlist in either army, North or South, hundreds, possibly over 1,000 women disguised themselves as men and enlisted. In the decades after the war, the general number was thought to be a little less than 400, and this is in the Union Army alone, so you can kind of multiply that for a little less than 400 by 2, because we have the Union Army and the Confederate Army. And this is based on an estimate that Mary Livermore of the United States Sanitary Commission gives in her memoirs, that's where that 400 number comes from. Deanne Blanton and Lauren Cook, in their book, They Fought Like Demons, Women Soldiers in the Civil War, which is kind of the go-to book for studying women soldiers in the Civil War. They are the kind of the groundbreaking researchers who dug through the archives and found so many. Deanne Blanton was an archivist. She's retired now, but she was an archivist at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and she dug through all the war files and pension files and that sort of thing, and came up with all kinds of, they document about 250 individual women soldiers in their book, and so that's They Fought Like Demons, Women Soldiers of the Civil War. And there's another book, Richard Hall, which is it's Women on the Civil War Battlefront, and in his work he goes and is really interested in database research, and so he dives deep into databases And in his estimate, that there possibly was up to 1,000 women who disguised themselves as men and fought in soldiers as in the Civil War. So that's where we get our numbers from. While, there's not, millions of women, as still, if you think of 1,000 women being involved in the men's world in fighting as soldiers in the Civil War, that's a pretty incredible thing, particularly, in the 1860s. They're ahead of their way ahead of their time and almost ahead of ours. So we have the writings of 3 women soldiers. We have that documented their service, either in letters or in memoirs that they wrote after they served. Most of the Civil War women soldiers that we know of were discovered when accident, sickness, wounding, or even death made it known to the others around them that they were women. And they were, these others who saw these women documented them in letters that were written home, in their diaries. They're even in official records in the War of Rebellion. There are documented women soldiers. So in medical records, they're found in hospitals, by nurses and surgeons. And of course, other soldiers that were around them could write home about their identities. So these is they also made their way into newspaper accounts of the day too. And so we will talk about one woman soldier that is definitely from newspaper accounts, but there is other corroborating evidence to just detail that she was, who she was, and that she enlisted. She was a real person and not just sort of a fantastic person made up in newspaper accounts. So, all right, there you go.
Okay, so in order to understand why women would want to disguise themselves as men and serve in the Army, when it was totally illegal for them to do this and they faced even possible imprisonment for doing so, we need to understand the distinct gender roles in 19th century society. So in mid-19th century society, women occupied a different social sphere from the men. Women were expected to stay home, take care of the kids, take care of the house, cook, and do all of those little domestic chores that were accepted for women to do. Domestic chores. So, and then the husband was expected to, of course, go earn the wage, and he was able to represent the family politically because he could go vote, and he was just supposed to be the support system for the home. So, in this idea of women at home, men working, it was unthinkable that a woman would want to break out of that accepted world, that she would want to dress as a man, that she would want to do the stuff that men did. And it was not thought that women were even capable of doing that, either mentally or physically. And so, therefore, this was it was not even thought of most of the time. However, there were some incentives for women to go ahead and do this, to disguise themselves as men and to serve in the Army. First of all, they would get all of the freedom disguised as a man that they couldn't get as a woman. They'd be able to vote. They could go wherever they wanted to go unaccompanied. And they could just be their own person. So that's a big plus. And in addition to that, they could earn a lot more money as disguised as a male than they could as a female. In Victorian society, there were only a few acceptable jobs for women that were considered appropriate, such as laundress or cook or governess, maid, things like that. Women who were desperate, of course, would go to prostitution. But a maid in New York, a well-paid maid in New York, could earn $4 a month. However, if she wanted to earn 3 times that amount, she would disguise herself as a man and serve in the Army, because the guys in the Army were earning $13 a month. So monetary reasons were high on the list. So some women also joined the Army because they wanted to follow a loved one. For example, if your husband's going to join the Army and you're going to be left at home on the farm, I mean, some of these women are like, no way, I'm going to follow you into the Army because I'm not going to be left at home alone. Some sisters were following brothers, things like that. And some women were also trying to escape an abusive home life or an arranged marriage, some way that they could get out, get some freedom, and be in disguise and not be found out. And then, of course, there were some women who were just way, way ahead of their time, who really wanted the adventure and the excitement of serving in the Army, so they would just go ahead and do it for kicks. Just, hey, let's see if I can get away with this. I want the adventure. So, how the heck were these women able to enlist? I mean, everybody thinks about the Army nowadays. You have to go into the recruiting office and you want to enlist. They strip you down, give you a head-to-toe physical. Well, that's really not the case. At the beginning of the Civil War, there weren't really extensive physicals done because the Army didn't have enough surgeons to staff the recruiting stations across the country. And so sometimes the only person there to examine these recruits was the general officer in charge with no medical experience whatsoever. So they were looking for a couple of things. They're looking for, you need a trigger finger. You need a trigger finger to shoot your rifle. You need a good right eye, because that is the eye you use to aim your weapon. And you need some teeth. You need teeth in order to chew the Army food, but you also need teeth in order to load your weapon, because back during in the 19th century, weapons were muzzle loading weapons, and your ammunition came in a paper cartridge with a bullet and powder, and in order to open that cartridge, you had to bite off the top. So you need teeth for that. And you have to be able to walk, so if you walk into the recruiting center, you're already checked off one of the boxes. So therefore, if you pass all of these requirements, you're in the Army. And once you're in the Army, soldiers kept their uniforms on a lot of the time. They very rarely took them off. Taking baths was very rare. And when they're on the march, they're sleeping in their uniforms. So therefore, a woman is not going to be required to take off her clothes in front of men. And as far as the latrine system, the bathrooms, a lot of the guys didn't really even want to use the assigned latrines and were going off to the woods, finding a nearby tree. So a soldier seen going into the woods to relieve themselves, it wouldn't be seen as strange at all. And again, there's the whole mindset of all of the fellow soldiers. In the 19th century, clothes make the man. So if a person's wearing trousers, hey, that person's automatically considered to be a male. And again, they're not looking for women soldiers. They're not scrutinizing the new recruits to see if there's a woman in there, because they just don't think women want to do this or are capable of doing this. So we have Sergeant Herman Weiss of the New York Heavy Artillery explaining in a letter to his wife how a woman in his regiment actually passed as a man for 3 full years. He writes, "It's no wonder that at all that her tent mates did not know she was a woman, for you must know we never undress to go to bed. On the contrary, we dress up. We go to bed with boots, overcoat, and all on, and she could find chances enough when she would be in the tent alone to change her clothes." So there you go. That's a good example. And another quote we have here is from Colonel Orlando Poe, who after the war discovered that his orderly, someone who was right under his very nose, serving with him, was a woman. And he says, "A single glance at her in her proper character caused me to wonder how I ever could have mistaken her for a man. I readily recall many things which ought to have betrayed her, except no one thought of finding a woman in a soldier's dress," because he just wasn't thinking about it. So if you're not thinking about it, you're not noticing the little things. So that is another good illustration of the mindset of the soldiers. So we're now going to introduce several women, the most well-known women who passed as soldiers. Okay, well, we're looking. You can go back there.
Well, yeah, you've been actually. We get the slide. This soldier right here. We're going to be talking about this soldier who's Albert Cashier. Next slide, please. And Albert Cashier was a soldier in the 95th Indiana who the female name was Jenny Hodgers. Now we don't know how this soldier was discovered. Was that in 1911 this person continued after the war working as a farm laborer and was clearing debris from a driveway and was actually struck by a car. And then the doctor was summoned, and in the process of setting the broken femur, the doctor discovered that this soldier who lived life since the Civil War as a man and had been doing odd jobs and had been a farm laborer and established an identity as a male, as Albert Cashier, was genetically female. So now whether this soldier was what we would call today transgender, we simply don't know. Albert Cashier was illiterate, so we don't have their own words about what they thought, whether they were continued on after the war because of their, because of economic reasons and because they liked voting and having a male persona just gave him that freedom, or whether they, it was a way of life that they obviously wanted to adopt that way of life. So, but anyway, so here we have this soldier. Enlisted with the 95th Illinois Infantry in 1862, would participate, served all her 3 years, Siege of Vicksburg, Red River Campaign, Battle of Nashville, mustered out with the regiment, and then lived as a Civil War veteran, a respected veteran in Sonneman, Illinois, until that automobile accident in 1911. Now, her secret was kept by her friends and by the surgeon until somehow the press got wind of the story. And then in 1911, we see the photograph there of women soldier in the 95th Illinois, of Albert Cashier as a soldier, and then in their GAR uniform. That's the newspaper account that was published. And because of the newspaper account, of course, the government gets involved and says, no, there's no way that this person could, a woman could have served in the Army, and we need to investigate this for pension fraud. So a pension fraud investigation ensues. Meanwhile, Cashier is living in a hospital because they're getting dementia. And so they're in a hospital, and because of the gender issues, Albert Cashier had to wear a dress because they're assigned to a female role. And Albert Cashier would trip over this dress. They haven't worn a dress since they were, a young person, and tripped over the dress and, broke their hip and basically was bedridden for the rest of their life. But Albert Cashier's comrades, that picture that we had seen of the tall soldier and then the small soldier that we were looking at, yeah, there you go. This was sort of a joke picture that came out in the pension fraud investigation, because it's the tallest soldier in the regiment and the shortest soldier in the regiment, both together. And of course, that's Albert Cashier as the shortest brave soldier of the regiment. But so Albert's comrades in arms came forward and testified in this pension investigation that she was just a brave soldier, one of the bravest soldiers, brave little soldiers in the regiment. Remarked that she didn't talk very much, or was kind of kept to themselves because, you know, they have kind of a secret that they're trying to hide, so that's kind of understandable. But they testified, and they got her cleared of pension fraud. But unfortunately, she didn't survive very long after the pension fraud. She would die in 1915, but was buried with full military honors.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about a Confederate. 2 letters survive in the collection of the Kentucky Historical Society that document the service of Mary Ann Clark, whose alias in the Army was Henry Clark. One letter was written by Clark's mother and described how Clark left home after her husband abandoned her and married another woman. And Mary Ann Clark spoke about joining the Army, but her mother didn't think that there was any way that she was going to do this. She thought, oh, it's an idle threat. Well, surprise! Nevertheless, Mary Ann Clark left one night in October of 1861, and the first news her mother found out about where she was that she had joined a Confederate General Braxton Bragg's army and had united with a cavalry company under the assumed name of Henry Clark. Way to shock your mother, Mary Ann. So Mary Ann Clark's surviving letter, which you can see here, you can't read it very well, so I'm going to give you a little excerpt here. This was written while she was a prisoner of war in Cairo, Illinois, in December of 1862. And she talks about her personal sacrifice, having to leave her children, and her conviction to continue the fight. So the letter reads, I wish you would write to my mother for me and tell her how, where, and when I was taken prisoner. Tell her what a good rebel soldier I have been. Tell her about me getting wounded and my detection. Tell her I never expect to see her again, as I may get killed in battle. There's a battle impending at Vicksburg, and I expect to be in it. Our officers here tell me that they will exchange me for a man. You will find my mother one of the most uncompromising rebels in Kentucky. I expect to start to Vicksburg in the morning. Give my love to all of my friends in Louisville, Mary Ann Clark. So based on the research of Blanton and Cook, who we mentioned before, who wrote the book They Fought Like Demons, Mary Ann Clark was wounded in the thigh at the Battle of Richmond, Kentucky, that was fought at the end of August of 1862. She was discovered to be a woman, but was still taken prisoner. She was held at several prisons, the last one being in Cairo, Illinois, and she was eventually exchanged in December of 1862. So newspaper stories about Clark circulated around, became a source of interest. She became a bit of a celebrity among Southern soldiers. A lot of Southern soldiers claimed that they saw her, or perhaps it was other women disguised as soldiers, and identified them as being, quote, the heroic Mary Ann Clark that they had read about in the newspapers.
Okay, well, we're on one of the, this is another really well-known and well-documented woman soldier, is Sarah Rosetta Wakeman, whose alias was Private Lyons Wakeman, would be with the 153rd Volunteer Infantry in New York. We know about her because she wrote letters home that were preserved by her family. And in the 1990s, her family came forward with her letters to Lauren Cook Burgess at the time. Lauren Cook, they're same person. She has a variety of different married names. But Lauren Cook gathered her letters together and would edit them and publish them in the Uncommon Soldier. And her personality, being Sarah Rosetta Wakeman's personality, just really comes through in the letters. She is just a determined woman with I mean, she's really like one of our favorite women soldiers, just by the spirit that comes through those letters. So if you can, Uncommon Soldier is a really good read if you wanted to read about the words of really the only woman soldier that we have, well, other than Mary Ann Clark in the letters. We have Mary Ann Clark and then Rosetta Wakeman. But anyway, about her, she was one of a number of children in a farming family, and she was the eldest. She was born in 1843, and and she finished school in 1860, and her father had a lot of debt on his family farm, and she wanted, being the eldest, feeling that she really wanted to help her family, kind of get out of this debt, that she would try to make money for the family, and she did it. She found that she worked as a domestic for a little while, like in the 1860 census, they talk about her being a domestic locally, and then she decides that she is going to take on male jobs because the male jobs pay better. So she becomes first a canal coal barge laborer, which pays $5 per trip, and in coming back from her first trip on the canal, she encounters a group of soldiers that are recruiting for the 153rd New York Volunteer Infantry Regiment that was being formed. And they offered her a $152 bounty, which is an extra pay that was made in addition to your monthly pay as a soldier, which in the Union Army was $13 a month. So you had your $13 a month pay plus this $152 bounty that I believe the state of New York was offering to encourage men to enlist in the Army. And she thought, well, this is fantastic. This would really help my family pay off the debts. And so she would enlist in August of 1862 with the 153rd New York Volunteer Infantry under the assumed name of Wakeman. The regiment would depart for Washington in October of 1862 and were assigned to the defenses of Washington. Wakeman sent her enlistment bounty home and wrote that she would help pay back the debt that her father owed. Wakeman was really happy with being in the Army, especially for the money and the independence Army life gave her. And in her words from her letters, "All the money I want, you should spend it for the family. Don't save it for me, for I can get all the money I want. I will help you all as long as I live. I'm enjoying myself better this summer than I ever did before in this world. I have good clothing and enough to eat and nothing to do, only handle my gun, and that I can do as well as the rest of them. I don't want you to mourn for me, for I can take care of myself, and I know my business as well as other folks know them for me. I will dress as I mind to, for all anyone else cares, and if they don't leave me alone, they shall be sorry for it." And she knocked down another soldier in her regiment who was giving her guff. As she was one tough cookie. She writes, "I've enjoyed myself best since I've gone away from home than I ever did before in my life. I have plenty of money to spend and a good time a soldier." So the 153rd New York Volunteer Infantry guards the defenses of Washington and until February of 1864. And then the 153rd New York Volunteer Infantry was sent to Louisiana to participate in the Red River Campaign. They would fight in 2 battles and endured a 70-mile forced march retreat done in 2 days. As a result of this campaign, Wakeman, like many of her male comrades, became sick with diarrhea, was hospitalized, and died. She's buried in Chalmette National Cemetery in Chalmette, Louisiana, under her enlisted alias, Wakeman. She was not discovered, or at least not outed, while she was in hospital. Were it not for her letters that survived, we would not know that the soldier in this grave was actually a woman, Sarah Rosetta Wakeman, from Bainbridge, New York.
Okay, another well-documented soldier. This one actually with the Antietam connection is Sarah Emma Edmonds, alias Private Franklin Thompson. She enlisted and served as a private with the 2nd Michigan Volunteer Infantry. And in 1864, she published her story, Nurse and Spy in the Union Army. She was born and raised in New Brunswick, Canada. And she ran away from home at age 17 to avoid an arranged marriage to a much older man. Her father was quite determined to find her, and so she figured the only way she can disappear is disguise herself as a man, which she did, and she adopted the alias Franklin Thompson. She took the job of a traveling book salesman, and decided she was going to go to Michigan. She actually was very, very successful in this venture as a book salesman. In May of 1861, after the fall of Fort Sumter, she was living in Flint, Michigan, and all of the young men in the town decided they were going to be patriotic and enlist. Well, already being accepted as a young man in Flint, Michigan, Sarah decided she too was going to enlist in the 2nd Michigan Infantry as Franklin Thompson. She was able to pass her physical exam. According to her, all they looked at were her hands. That's it, just her hands. So then she's in the Army. So as a private, because she was kind of slight of build, they thought, well, maybe you'll be better off serving as a nurse. At the beginning of the Civil War, all of the nurses in the Army were male. So Franklin Thompson, aka Sarah, was designated to be a nurse. And also, she was also designated later on as the regimental mail carrier. So around the time of the Battle of Second Manassas, which is 1862, she was transporting the regimental mail riding a mule. And the mule tripped and fell and rolled over on her and broke her rib and gave her some serious injuries. Well, of course, she's not going to want to go to the regimental surgeon to have her ribs looked at because he's going to discover her to be a female, obviously. So she actually had to basically treat herself and deal with the broken ribs on her own. I can't even imagine the pain she went through on that one. She also served as a spy, going across Confederate lines in a variety of disguises, including an Irish peddler woman and an enslaved woman. So she was quite active. In Nurse and Spy in the Union Army, which is the title of her memoirs, she writes she was at the Battle of Antietam, where she supposedly comforted and buried another woman soldier. Now, Audrey and I have done research into this. The 2nd Michigan was in Washington at the time of the Battle of Antietam. The regiment was not serving on the battlefield, and Sarah Edmonds does not list the Battle of Antietam as one of the places she served in her pension request. So we're not really sure about did this really occur or not. We think perhaps it was a literary device that she used because she puts words in the mouth of the dying woman soldier that perhaps she herself wants to say to her audience.
If I may interrupt, and indeed her editor, or in the publication, uses very similar phrasing in his explanation to his introduction to the soldier. The words are very, very similar.
Right, so she just wants to say, you know, she has the best intentions at heart for volunteering. She wants to serve her country. As I said, we're not really sure about, we checked her military records, and she supposedly was on detached service in September of 1862, but that particular roll sheet is missing from her military file. So, we don't know.
It's the only one.
It's the only missing sheet in her file. But anyway, we have an intriguing clue. A tantalizing possibility is offered by Aaron Good, who was hired by the Antietam National Cemetery Board to help locate, identify, and reinter bodies into the newly established cemetery for Union dead. Well, when he was doing this, he submitted an advertisement in the June 14th, 1865 Hagerstown Herald and Torchlight, trying to locate the family of a Union woman soldier that he found buried on the battlefield. Could this woman soldier be the one that Edmonds treated and then eventually buried? Or was this another woman soldier who, like Edmonds, had disguised herself, took a male identity, and then unfortunately paid the final cost for serving her country. In case you're having trouble reading the advertisement, it says, Mr. Good, who is actively engaged collecting a list of the names of the dead on Antietam battlefield and other information for the use of the trustees, has discovered that a woman acting as a Union soldier in uniform was killed in that great battle. We have not learned her name or residence, but presume Mr. Good has all the information by which her friends will be able to identify her remains. Unfortunately, nobody ever answered this advertisement. We don't know who this woman was, and we assume she was buried in the Antietam National Cemetery in an unknown grave. So while it's not certain if Edmonds was at Antietam, she most certainly was at the Battle of Fredericksburg. As I mentioned, she served as an orderly, relaying messages to the officers while under fire. And in March of 1863, the regiment went to Lebanon, Kentucky. Sarah Edmonds fell ill with malarial fever at this time, and she, of course, did not want to go to a doctor for the same reason she didn't for her ribs. And then she eventually was thinking that she could apply for a furlough, and when she was on furlough, then she could dress as a woman again and visit a civilian doctor. But, however, the Army denied her a furlough. So she was really left with no other course of action than to desert. She said she'd rather have been shot dead than be known to be a woman in the Army. It would have destroyed her reputation. So eventually she deserts the Army, puts on female clothing, goes and gets treated for malaria, and eventually she goes and volunteers with the as a nurse, but in her regular female guise. So she serves as a female nurse the rest of the war. However, after the war, the injury to her ribs is greatly disabling her. She's seeing other veterans getting pensions, and she figures, well, hey, I served too. Why can't I get a pension? So in 1883, she sets out to prove that, number one, she was Franklin Thompson, and that, number two, her desertion was because of the fact that she was a female and not because she was neglecting her duty. So in 1883 to 1884, she approaches her comrades from the 2nd Michigan, and she walks into the room and they're looking at her going, wow, you just look, and she's walking in a dress as a woman, and they're looking at her going, hey, do you have a sister, a brother? Because you look just like Franklin Thompson. And she's like, surprise, I am Franklin Thompson. So, of course, they're all shocked, but they actually positively identify her, say that she served, and they wrote testimonials to the United States government in favor of her receiving a pension. The U.S. Congress passes an act to allow her to receive a pension, and so in 1886, her pension was granted. She is the only known woman soldier to receive a pension from the United States government.
Okay. In the papers of the famous humanitarian Clara Barton, an account written for the St. Louis Illustrated Magazine, dated April 1883, written by Dr. F.H. Harwood, formerly an assistant surgeon in the 5th Wisconsin Infantry. D.H. Harwood recalled how after the Battle of Antietam, he asked Miss Barton to help him examine a wounded Union soldier who was refusing examination. The doctor suspected that this young man was actually a young woman, and he asked Clara Barton to calm the soldier, the wounded soldier, so she could be treated. The wounded soldier did confess to Clara Barton that she was named Mary Hartwell, gave names as Mary Hartwell or Mary Galloway, and said that she was a resident of Frederick, Maryland, which is where we are here. So we're telling this story. She disguised herself as a soldier to follow a young lieutenant in the 3rd Wisconsin Infantry named Harry Bernard. They had met when the 3rd Wisconsin was stationed in Frederick in the fall of 1861. And according to Harwood, the regimental officers had billeted in Mary's house, and the two fell in love. When the 3rd Wisconsin came through Frederick in the Maryland campaign in 1862, Mary was determined that she was not going to leave her beau behind, so she disguised herself she got, I guess her father had some Union uniforms in a storeroom, and she pilfered them and went and followed the Army of the Potomac, trying to locate the 3rd Wisconsin. Claiming to be the regimental hospital steward, she rode across South Mountain in an ambulance train. At Antietam on the day of the battle, Mary linked up with General Baldy Smith's division. She was crouched behind a fallen tree in a bushy hollow and raised her head. She was struck by a bullet through her upper chest, and it lodged in her back. She crawled into the bushes, where she lay for more than 36 hours before Union soldiers found her. They brought her to a farmhouse on the Union right and placed her in an open shed where Dr. Harwood would find her. Assistant Surgeon Harwood was astonished not only to find a female in a soldier's clothes, but also that the bullet had passed through her chest without injuring any internal organs, and that she fared so well after 36 hours without food and water before she was found and treated. According to Harwood, Clara Barton met Mary's beloved in a hospital in Frederick, resisting to have his septic wounded left arm amputated. Clara had Mary brought in to soothe her lover so he would allow himself to have this life-saving surgery. Harwood relates how the two united lovers married after they recovered and had a daughter who they named Clara Barton, named Clara after Clara Barton. A feel-good, happily ever after story if there was one. Now, there are several big caveats to this story. The names given in Harwood's accounts seem to be aliases. There is no Harry Bernard in the 3rd Wisconsin's regimental records. The only Mary Galloway I've been able to find in the 1860 Frederick County Census is a 16-year-old African-American teen living in Frederick City. So there's no one by the name of Mary Hartwell in the 1860 Frederick Census, which is the other surname that Surgeon Harwood gives for Mary. So it is possible that the family moved temporarily to Frederick during the war and were not living in Frederick County during the 1860 or 1870 censuses to be present. There are several young women named Mary Galloway in the 1860 census living in Baltimore County, but just not in Frederick itself. So, and we are currently, but Tracey and I are currently researching this. We are going through Frederick hospital lists that were compiled by the National Museum of Civil War Medicine, and Terry, yay, Terry, for soldiers in the 3rd Wisconsin who were wounded at Antietam and then discharged. We then tracked these soldiers in the 1870 federal census and are seeing if they married a woman, their spouses from Maryland, and if they, are living in the area, and to see if they have a daughter that's named Clara. Now, we have found one resident of Washington County that is a suspect. He was with the 3rd Wisconsin. John, it's John Harrison, and his wife is actually named Mary. And he's from Wisconsin, but she is from Washington County, from Roarsburg, if I remember correctly. I have long COVID, and so sometimes names are kind of difficult for me to dig up. It's very frustrating. But anyway, that's a possibility, but we haven't finished going through the whole regimental records yet to identify this person.
To be continued, our research, that is. Okay, so now we talk about an unknown woman discovered among the dead at Antietam in an unpublished memoir that's now in the collection of the United States Army Military History Institute. Private Mark Nickerson of the 10th Massachusetts Infantry recalls finding a Confederate woman killed during the Battle of Antietam. And this is what he writes. A sergeant in charge of a burial party from our regiment reported to his captain that there was a dead Confederate up in the cornfield who he had reason to believe was a woman. He wanted to know if she should be kept separate or brought along with the others. The captain, after satisfying himself that this Confederate was a woman, ordered that she be buried by herself. The news soon spread among the soldiers that there was a woman among the Confederate dead, and many of them went and gazed upon the upturned face, and tears glistened in many eyes as they turned away. She was wrapped in a soldier's blanket and buried by herself, and a headboard made from a cracker box was set up at her grave marked Unknown Woman, CSA. Nothing in my experience up to that time affected me as did that incident. I wanted to know her history and why she was there. She must have been killed just as the Southerners were being driven back from the cornfield. Well, in recent years, new evidence has popped up that might verify this particular story. Because there's a newly discovered burial map that was made in 1864 by Simon G. Elliott. It's a map of burials on the battlefield at Antietam. It was discovered in the New York Historical Society within the last couple of years. So in the triangular area between the Hagerstown Pike and the Smoketown Road, if you look on the picture, there's one, it's a dash, kind of like, well, it sort of looks like an eye, that is in the middle, sort of isolated from the others. And, yep, that's it right there. And we're wondering, because that's a single slash indicates a Confederate grave, and we're wondering, well, that's in the cornfield area. Why is it isolated? Why is it by itself? So perhaps this might be the woman Confederate's grave.
A fourth woman soldier that we think fought at the Battle of Antietam is Rebecca or Georgiana Peterman with the 7th Wisconsin Volunteer Infantry. She was a 15-year-old resident of Ellenboro, Wisconsin in the 1860 census, and she lived with her stepfather, John Haney, and his family. According to newspaper accounts, she enlisted with her stepbrother, John Haney, and John Haney enlisted in August of 1861 as a private in Company C of the 7th Wisconsin Volunteer Infantry, a regiment in the famed Iron Brigade. His service records record his death from disease in Washington, D.C. in November of 1862. According to press accounts, Rebecca Peterman served as a drummer boy for the first year of her service, then as a soldier and as a scout. At Antietam, her regiment fought in the cornfield, but she escaped unharmed. After her discharge in late of 1864, she was arrested while traveling home through Chicago, and then was hounded by the press for the rest of her journey back to Ellenboro. She was questioned about her motives for soldiering. The St. Paul Pioneer of February 19, 1865 reported that, quote, "She gives no reason for entering the service other than a desire to see what war was, and to be near her brother and her cousin who were in the same regiment. Her cousin induced her to take that step," unquote. After her stepbrother died of apoplexy in 1862, Peterman would stay on with the regiment. Her appearance was described as, quote, "a rather slenderly formed with somewhat masculine features, though with a very small and delicate hand," unquote. In her soldiers, this is another quote, "in her soldier's clothes, she has the appearance of a rather good-looking boy of 16. She is of medium height with dark eyes and hair. She is very quiet," unquote. And quote, "all who have seen this military specimen agree that she is unusually good-looking," unquote. According to her school teacher, quote, "I remember seeing her in her uniform. She's a fine-looking soldier. In fact, looked better as a soldier than as a girl," unquote. She was not suspected of being a girl by anyone in the regiment other than her cousin and stepbrother, who of course knew. Peterman's former comrade said she was, quote, "one of the most gallant soldiers he ever saw," unquote, and swore, quote, "that she is a good fellow," unquote. Following her discharge from the 7th Wisconsin, Peterman was on her way home to Ellenboro, Wisconsin, when she arrived in Chicago. Her overcoat, which held her discharge papers and her money, was stolen at the Soldiers' Rest. Without funds and in a strange city, she was reduced to wandering around, and this is winter too in Chicago, looking around for a warm and hospitable place to spend the night. She went to the police station and was asked to sleep there, but a policeman then detected something wrong in the appearance of the soldier. And so he questioned her and ultimately, Peterman would confess to being a woman. And then the Chicago Evening Journal on February 14th, 1865 reported the incident immediately, and the story was reprinted in other papers. After praising Peterman for her good service, the Chicago Reporter appeared surprised that, quote, "she seemed to regard her past course as something not to be regretted," unquote. Peterman did regret finding herself in the press spotlight. When she reached home in Ellenboro, the local papers, the Platteville Witness and the Grant County Witness, heralded her arrival. When she left home 2 weeks later, after her older sister died in a freak accident, that too was reported in the newspaper, although the reporter attributed Peterman's leaving home to the fact that her mother was pressuring her to don a dress. Wearing her uniform, Peterman went to Prairie du Chien and checked into a soldier's hospital, but a few soldiers from her Army days recognized her, and she was forced to leave. She went next to Boscobel and tried to re-enlist, but she was unsuccessful there. So then she went to Portage, tried to re-enlist, but was recognized and imprisoned. For more than a month, her travels were printed and reprinted in Wisconsin newspapers. Reporters from the Grant County Witness interviewed her stepfather, who said that Peterman's, quote, wild, erratic course was a source of grief to her staid and respectable family, unquote. And he further claimed the girl is perfectly uncontrollable, unquote. The saga of Peterman's post-Army days ended when she left Portage, and she disappears completely from the press and from the historical record.
So according to the Princeton, Indiana Clarion, dated November 14, 1863, Catherine Davidson of Sheffield, Ohio, supposedly served with the 28th Ohio Infantry at Antietam. She had followed her lover into service, and he was supposedly killed there. She was badly wounded in the same battle, and her arm had to be amputated. She, in soldier's disguise, was helped at some point in her hospital transfer by Governor Curtin of Pennsylvania. She, in gratitude, gave him a ring with her initials in it. He had no clue that she was a woman at this point. So after her dismissal from the service, she called upon the governor to thank him in person, and she was wearing a dress at this point. She came upon him at the Continental Hotel in Philadelphia, and she rushed over to him and poured out her thanks for his kindness. The governor was surprised, of course. A woman was a soldier. He can't believe it. He had helped her on the battlefield. So he happened to be wearing the ring that she had given him. She showed him her initials on the inside of the ring. He offered to return it, but she said, quote, the finger that used to wear that ring will never wear it anymore. The hand is dead, but the soldier lives still, unquote. So, was this true or not? Well, according to author Richard Hall, the 28th Ohio had 11 wounded soldiers at the Battle of Antietam, and only one soldier stands out to be a possible candidate for someone that could have been Catherine Davidson. Private William Holzhuck of Company F was discharged for wounds on March 9th of 1863, listed because he lost his arm. This is the only entry that lists the exact nature of the wound. No William Holzhuck appears in the 1850, 1860, or 1870 census in Ohio, so we think perhaps that this was the alias that Catherine Davidson used. There's some doubt as to whether Governor Curtin initially helped her at Antietam. He was not really on the battlefield at that point, but further research of hospital records might throw some light on this aspect of the story. But it's a good guess that William Holzhuck was Catherine Davidson.
A woman soldier in an undesignated New Jersey regiment gave birth at Fredericksburg, Virginia, according to the letters written home by Altus Jewell, dated April 10, 1863, by Samuel S. Partridge in the 13th New York Infantry, also dated April 10, 1863, and a letter of Colonel Elijah H.C. Cavins of the 14th Indiana Infantry, dated January 19, 1863. Supposedly, she was in her second trimester when she fought and was wounded at Antietam. She was promoted to corporal before the Battle of Fredericksburg. Samuel Partridge of the 13th New York Infantry wrote, "She was young and a good-looking corporal. Her courtesy and military bearing struck the officers very favorably. She was a real soldierly, thoroughly military fellow." She fought at the Battle of Fredericksburg, after which she was promoted to sergeant. Colonel Elijah H.C. Cavins stated, quote, "A corporal was promoted to sergeant for gallant conduct at the Battle of Fredericksburg, since which time the sergeant has become a mother of a child. What use have we for women if soldiers in the Army can give birth to children?" When her baby boy was born, she was very much discussed among the men of the Army of the Potomac. Despite all the correspondence written home about her, her name and her alias or her regiment was not mentioned.
So now we come to a questionable women soldier who claims to have fought at Antietam. Ida Remington is referenced in two 1863 newspaper accounts. Ida Remington supposedly enlisted with the 11th New York Infantry, the famed New York Fire Zouaves. The Detroit Advertiser and Tribune reported that she was arrested at a saloon in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. After receiving an honorable discharge, she was put in jail for being drunk in public and for impersonating a man. Remember, it's illegal to do that. She claimed to have served in the 11th New York for 2 years, and she claimed to have participated in the battles of South Mountain and Antietam. She told authorities that she had been the personal servant to the captain in the regiment. But her claims to Army combat service are dubious because the 11th New York was not at Antietam or South Mountain, and it was an elite unit composed specifically of firemen from New York City. So it is doubtful that she would have been able to enter the unit undetected unless she'd been impersonating a fireman for years before the war.
Although women soldiers are few in number compared to the millions of male soldiers who served in the Civil War, they surprised and astonished their fellow soldiers and countrymen by their presence and their courage. Indeed, their presence still surprises us today. Surviving documentation suggests there were several women soldiers at Antietam. There were 2 unknown deceased women soldiers found by burial details, 1 Union, 1 Confederate. Possible women soldiers who were at Antietam include Sarah Emma Edmonds, Rebecca Peterman, Catherine Davidson, and an unknown pregnant soldier from New Jersey. Mary Galloway or Hartwell's story suggests 1 woman at Antietam was wounded while dressed as a soldier, and Ida Remington's story is reported as very suspect. She was likely not a soldier and not at Antietam. Any questions from the audience?
Thank you all for tuning in. No questions from the audience. That's hard to believe. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time and attention. And I do want to mention, if you're interested in purchasing any of the books that we have mentioned, An Uncommon Soldier, the letters of Sarah Rosetta Wakeman, or They Fought Like Demons by Lauren Cook and Deanne Blanton, or even Sarah Emma Edmonds' memoirs that she released in 1864. All 3 of these books are available on the museum's website. Just go to our online store, and you can purchase them there. So thank you very much for your attention this afternoon, and we hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you all.
All right.